Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Lower East Side here in the city, powered by the East Side Community Network and sponsored by none other than the Ford Foundation. Now, a content partner to the new bridgedetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen to us on. We drop a new episode every week, so be sure to turn on those notifications. Today, we are happy to welcome Khalilah Burt Gaston. She is the CEO of the Glide Path Strategies firm, and Yusef Shakur, Program Director of the Michigan Roundtable for Diversity and Inclusion. Khalilah and Yusef, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys for coming on. Yusef, another unofficial co-host of Authentically Detroit, who needs no invitation or introduction really to our listeners. Certainly a lot going on in the world. The governor had a rare press conference on Sunday citing a shutdown. So before we get into the news and everything, just want to do a check-in. How is everybody doing? Donna, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I had a real stressful last week. Just listening to some of the doomsday predictions and trying to stay positive myself and not show my, anxiety. But it came up when I woke up at 4 a.m. and I was obsessively doing something I never do, and that's watching television news, which was super odd for me. But then we went to Traverse City for the last hurrah before this most recent shutdown for a socially distanced retreat, and it was good.
Good.
Go through Trump country, and so whenever we drive through Trump country, Kevin has this song he likes to play called "This Land" by Gary Clark. Have you heard that?
I have not.
You have to hear it. I'm telling you, it's great. So yeah,
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, check it out. So that's what we were doing. We were listening. He was blasting Gary Clark in my ears when we were driving through Trump country. But other than that, it was good.
Khalilah, how are you?
Yeah.
And okay, I think like Donna probably experienced a little bit of just anxiety last week. I was one of the challengers at TCF the day after Election Day, and really had to recognize that what I had experienced was actually traumatic. And so it took me a few days just to kind of process that and to acknowledge that and to rest. So this week, I'm kind of taking it easy.
You deserve to take it easy. It's so funny that it took you a few days to process that what you experienced was trauma. I was traumatized immediately. I remember texting Donna just like, yo, what is this? Get everybody from the hood down here right now to stop these crazy people.
He did. And I was like, I'm not calling Yusef. You know what? I'm not doing that. I have my hood, but the thing that really bothered me is me thinking they were trying to provoke somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and I really did believe they were trying to provoke people. And I just admire people who went there and didn't get provoked into doing what I know they wanted you to do, because had there been violence or had there been any type of public real confrontation, it would have played right into their hands. And you guys just kept your cool, that you didn't let them disturb you. And I think that is truly amazing. I mean, obviously you were disturbed in an inner way, but you didn't stop the count. You know what I mean? It was just great.
Yeah.
I just think kudos. Yeah, just real kudos goes to, I would say, the, election workers who were there, over the course of those three days. So, I was there one day, but they were the ones who were putting in the long hours, ensuring that all of the votes were counted. So kudos to them.
Yeah. Yusef, how are you?
Man, I'm good. Not different form of anxiety. Been promoted to a new position at the job, deputy director for strategy innovation, and then got accepted into a PhD program. So I'm trying to look forward to managing 2021.
I know, right? Can we all get up and dance? Where's
know,
Belle? Belle, I am just so excited and proud for you, Yusef, for the leadership that you're providing and the fact that you're really able to take the roundtable in a new direction, as I know you will in your role. So
Thank you.
Dr. Yusef is what I'm gonna be calling him.
all these books. I can't. How many books are in that room? Because I was like, I'm
saying.
Because I'm worried that you've read all of the books I'm reading. I'm like trying to catch up, and it's hard. But
Donna, before you got on, I was talking to both of them about their bookshelves and how I feel grossly inadequate and not smart looking at everything that they've been able to digest. Jeez.
Well, a couple things for me. I actually used to have so many books, but then through successive downsizing, divorce moves, and just crisis, all my books, so I have that many books on my Kindle account. My Kindle is full between Kindle and Audible. I do have some books, but most of my books are electronic.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I think I'm a millennial, even though my millennial children will not touch an electronic book and want a hard book. And I'm like, what's wrong with you all? Innovation.
It's definitely a different experience.
Mm-hmm. You said it's a different experience?
Yeah, I try to read online and I can't do it. I really need a hard book. I still print out things, and when I'm doing heavy reading, to highlight and to make notations. So I definitely wish that I could be like you. Because as you can tell, we have lots of books, and my husband has lots of books, and my daughter has lots of books. So if we could make that transition, it would be good for the house.
I love it. Well, guys, it is time for
your weekend, Orlando.
Oh, how am my weekend? You know what? I am doing the best I can. This weekend for me was unusually tough. I think that everybody at some point or another throughout the pandemic has had to just face a level of mental anxiety and torment. And this weekend was just that for me. It was just so much going on in my brain. And I was able to just sort of have a conversation with myself to just, level set and calm down. I stayed in all weekend. I did nothing, tried to rest, but it's hard. And I feel for those folks who struggle with severe depression as the days have gotten shorter. It's getting dark at 4:55. It's cold outside. There's not a lot of sun. If you go to work, you're going to work early in the morning. And when you get off, by the time you get off, it's dark. So seasonal affective disorder is real. I don't suffer from that, but I just want to recognize the many people who do in our community, coupled with the fact that, yes, we are in the midst of a pandemic where Black folks are, disparately affected. And the governor just announced on Sunday that we're essentially heading into another 3-week shutdown. And then, of course, she'll reevaluate whether to extend that shutdown. And if you all remember what it was like in the spring, she sort of did it like 3 weeks at a time, and then would come back and say, okay, we're staying in another, and we're just like, oh my God. And so it's going to be a long winter. And I just want to shout out everybody who struggles with winter, struggle with daylight saving time. We love you, and our prayers are with you. And hit us up if you need to, talk. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram and Twitter. So, but I'm good. Thanks for asking, Donna. It's time for Fresh Off the Press news that we are thinking about. If you have pieces that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. Donna, Fresh Off the Press.
Detroit activists say police response to pro-Trump protests is hypocritical. Bryce Huffman is reporting from Bridge, Detroit. You just mentioned the protest a minute ago, Khalilah, and I think we all saw it on television. We saw that there were protesters who were screaming at people and banging on windows and acting a fool. And the police came, and I think one of them got arrested for driving a car and making a lot of noise. But for the most part, the police did not engage in violent behavior. And, I thought about it because this is an election and there's some special rules. I'm trying to imagine Black people being downtown in Detroit doing the exact same thing and not getting arrested. So, one of the things is how we frame people. We had a conversation earlier this week, Orlando, about the whole use of the term militia and the fact that militias are organized by the governor or by the president. You can't just create a gun club and call yourself a militia and exercise rights as a militia. You know what they call that in the hood? They call that a gang, right? But white people are militias. And so when you use nomenclature like gang violence and things like that, when you use nomenclature like protest instead of riot, then it justifies certain types of police response. So I want to be really clear. I don't think that the police should have gone down to Kobo and arrested people, because I think that people should have the right to free speech. Although I think, when they're breaking the law and banging on windows, they should have been removed, maybe just put in a paddy wagon and driven to TCF Stadium so that we could remove them from the scene of the crime. It's not quite an arrest. But I also don't think that those people who were protesting through Black Lives Matter, who were in R, were breaking the law. And I don't think they should have been arrested either. And so if you're going to arrest people for protests, you got to arrest everybody for protest, in my mind. As Nakia Wallace said, a co-founder of Detroit Will Breathe, she said that they did not hesitate to try and silence our voices, to erase the feelings of Black Detroiters, and to erase the experiences of Black people in the movement. In a video on the Detroit Police Department's Facebook page, Craig spoke about the protest to a group of reporters outside TCF Center on Friday. He says he and his officers allow people to exercise their constitutional right as long as they follow the law. If there are individuals in a group that shift from peaceful protest to committing crimes, throwing projectiles at our officers, attacking or destroying property, those are the kinds of things that make us respond, Craig said in the video. And I'm reminded of the protesters who were walking down Gratiot peacefully, and they broke a curfew. And the city had some kind of military maneuver to encircle them and then put them, tied their hands together. What do you call those things? They put the ziplock their wrists.
Zip tie.
Yeah.
Use tear gas, and there were no projectiles. There weren't even accusations of projectiles. But it's interesting because he did mention constitutional rights. And Yusef and I have had a couple of forums where we have spoken together. And I've talked about the fact that Black people are more subject than citizen when it comes to being able to have their constitutional rights enforced. There is a constitutional right for white people to walk around the Capitol open carrying, and you know that that right does not exist for Black people. And in this instance, you had them coming here trying to disrupt the counting of ballots, and nothing happened. So that really stuck out to me, and I just wanted to once again bring that up. What are your thoughts, Khalilah, Yusef?
Well, I mean, it's not shocking, really, right, to hear, at least I wasn't shocked to hear Chief Craig voice that inconsistency. I think, looking at what transpired over the summer, but then also being there at TCF, it definitely did feel like people were being treated differently. And so when he made the comment about peaceful protests, right, it didn't feel peaceful for those 1,500 people who were inside, right, who saw people climbing the windows, who saw people bamming on the outside windows, who saw people there trying to take pictures of you, hurling insults and slurs, and physically harassing election workers, and trying to intimidate them. So, I will say that after several hours, the police did actually escort people out of the counting room after several attempts to get them to quiet down. But also, to your point, Donna, there were people there who were very vocal as far as their Second Amendment rights, in front of everyone. I have the right to bear arms. So when you talk about what is peaceful protest, what is intimidation, I think it needs to be very clear, and our city leadership needs to respect that. City leadership needs to step up to protect residents, and and do their job. So I wasn't surprised. It was definitely disappointing, to be in the room, but also to hear those comments. So unfortunately, I think protests have become highly politicized over this last election cycle.
I think the unfortunate reality when you have someone such as Hollywood Craig, who tends to want to uphold the principles of what's right and negate the history of this country. Again, there's different rules for Black folks pertaining specifically to white folks. The situation that happened, it was like a flashback. We could have been in the 1930s and 1940s or 50s, right?
Mhm.
And knowing how white officers, white Ku Klux Klan members are treated differently. I mean, there's stories of the FBI infiltrating the Ku Klux Klan, and when they're talking about killing Black folks or whatnot, and they've never been arrested, or in the magnitude of the way they did the Black Panther Party and the other organization, they was never assassinated. Doors was kicked in. So when you move forward and you have a Black man, Hollywood, who's more about the lights and cameras and action more so than the reality, and creating a narrative that continues to negate our experience. And then, I mean, the fundamental, we talk about democracy, right? And democracy should be reflective of the human experience and the ability to uphold the principles of this country. And again, it just reinforces we're treated as second-class citizens.
Yeah.
We are. And, again, for me, it wasn't surprising to hear James Craig's rhetoric. I mean, this is a regular contributor to Fox News. He has called protesters Marxists for having signage at protests and rallies. I mean, what's so new about protesters carrying signs, and why does that make them Marxists? I think, and so it is. It's asinine to me that he's able to say the things and do the things that he does without a check from the executive seat. And so that says to me, and this is speculative, that what he says and what he does is sanctioned by the mayor, who appoints the chief of police. And that's disappointing. It's disappointing to me. We have emboldened these crazy folks in British Detroit. We call them a mob, to come to our city, right? A white mob, that's what we call them. Come to our city and disrupt democracy in that way. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in my life. I've never seen people go to the center of the Central County Board room and start screaming. I've never seen that. I've never seen people banging on windows at the Central County Board trying to disparage and intimidate election workers. And the saga continues. Breaking news right now, the Wayne County Board of Canvassers refused to certify the election results in the city of Detroit. This is
for the whole county, right? For the whole county. So they allow, yes. Right? So not only disenfranchising Detroit voters.
Oh, wait. Wayne County Board of Canvassers have not certified.
They just refused. This is breaking news. They just refused while we're recording. So they're trying to cite fraud. They're on message with Donald Trump.
The Wayne
Um,
County Board of Canvassers?
it's two
Yes, there's
Republicans and
two
two
Republicans,
Democrats.
two
And so they are deadlocked on certifying the Wayne County election. And so British Detroit ran a story on Monica, I think her last name is Palmer, who is the chair of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers, but was also credentialed to
as
be
a challenger.
as a challenger. And we asked Jocelyn Benson whether or not that was a conflict of interest. We asked her that, and she said she would look into it. And now, a couple of weeks later, she and the other Republican person on the Wayne County Board of Canvassers are refusing to certify elections for the entire county because they want to disenfranchise or not, or I'm sorry, I am so upset. They want to quiet the voice.
I don't know if I can. I don't even know if I can. I don't know what to do about this. Like,
and so her comment, Nancy Caffer is reporting on this. Her comment was she would be open to certifying the vote for communities other than Detroit.
So this is Michigan's, and so Detroit is home of Michigan's largest.
If they don't certify, what happens?
State intervention. I think the state will have to ram it through.
State.
So who's on the state board of electors?
I don't know. That's something that we need to.
It's still bipartisan. I think it's still two. So if I think the state board doesn't certify, then there's another level. I think maybe the courts have to intervene. But yes, so on record with her bias and her prejudice and her racism toward the city. And I definitely think so. Since, that Wednesday, I've had a few state legislatures reach out to ask, basically for me to share my experience. And this is a situation where the state legislature allowed really what to occur. So other states across the country passed laws basically stating that challengers would have to stand at least 6 feet away from election workers, one, to ensure that there is safe, social distancing. Our legislature did not do that. So, as Orlando, I'm sure you saw, people were hovering. They were physically harassing election workers 2 to 3 inches away from them. So there was an article in the New York Times last week about this coordinated effort. So make no mistakes about it. This was and is a coordinated effort that has its fingers and its tentacles in state, local, and national politics. And so staying on message, this strategy was something that was rolled out by the RNC, the Republican Party nationally. And it was something that was able to basically move forward because they had sanctions against them for over 20 years related to election observers and challengers that just expired. So it's not shocking that the first election that they could unleash this type of harassment against Black and brown voters and election workers across the country, they did. And our legislature did not step up.
I get that. So now what? I guess that's my question. Because if the state board of canvassers, if the Wayne County Board of Canvassers decides to disenfranchise Detroit, and we've been disenfranchised through emergency powers over the years, then what? Is there going to be I don't.
I mean, the news is so fresh, and it is shocking, and it is. I mean, this literally happened while we were recording, and so we are, and I don't want us to feel the pressure to. And this is the crazy part, and I'm going to get emotional, but it is. We should not feel the pressure to try to put words to things that are actively traumatizing us right away, because we can't, and we don't know what the recourse or the course of action is right after this. That's something that I want to let our listeners know that we will have to do the research on. We do know that the state has some intervention powers, but we don't know who makes up that board and what that looks like if they don't certify. But this is challenging, and this is challenging to report. We are seeing active suppression.
Active go back to something that you said, Orlando, in terms of Hollywood getting on Fox News and was saying they was Marxists.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Well, it's not interesting. It's when we know history, right? Those who was identified as communists was treated like the antichrist in this country, and so that's basically called a lynch mob. I mean, for white folks in particular, and it's the same thing that Trump has been doing. When he's in his attack against Joe Biden and et cetera, is this ace in the hole, because again it develops this level of fear amongst white people, in particular of their power, right? And so everything that we just talked about is not talked about in the same way as how white people deal with black folks and brown folks in regard to what democracy should be for us. So it's dangerous for a black person, or a so-called black person, to be able to say those type of things around other black people, and for him to be in this position that he's in is a direct result of struggle, as a direct result of protest, as a direct result of challenging the system.
Yeah, it is disheartening. It's so on message and on par with the longest running PR strategy that is America around dehumanizing and marginalizing Black folks, not only our voice, our votes, but our actual bodies, in addition to that. So as we become more educated on what the next steps are, we promise you that you will hear about it here on Authentically Detroit. Okay. Go ahead, Khalilah.
I just want to say the thing, I guess the silver lining, at least out of all of this, is, at least for me personally, is to truly have a better understanding of how democracy works. I think, growing up, I heard a lot about registering to vote. I heard a lot about voting, but I didn't really hear a lot about protecting the vote. And what we're seeing now, right, are all of the different layers and all of the different ways in which voter suppression can still occur. And so I think hopefully people will continue to educate themselves. Our community will continue to educate themselves about the process. People will volunteer as challengers and maybe run for a spot on the canvassing board. But I think this has been really eye-opening, at least for me, to understand what truly goes into all of this.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to pull myself back in to any level of, because I was frantically searching for the news on this, and I realized it was odd that we hadn't heard anything. And so this broke, and this goes to the state. As you said, they forfeited their right. Now Wayne County is going to have to pay for the Secretary of State and the State Board of Canvassers to perform the work that they refused to perform. And we can only hope that that doesn't happen, although I have no more confidence in the State Board of Canvassers than I do in the Wayne County Board of Canvassers. And so, I think that what I will try to do between now and tomorrow, because I'm going to have difficulty sleeping again, is research what all of this means. And hopefully we'll have an update that we can share then.
Yeah. Fresh off the press, program to keep Detroiters in their homes nearing deadline. Here is how to apply. So this is the HP TAP program that allows low-income Detroiters to apply for either a full or partial property tax exemption. This is Nusrat Rahman for Breach Detroit in partnership with the Free Press, who's reporting on this. There are a number of community development organizations that you can contact here in the city of Detroit that will counsel you through this HPTAP application. Sadly, this application is really difficult for the average person to get through, and you gotta receive all kind of trainings and things to actually fill it out and fill it out correctly. So my advice to you is not to try to fill it out on your own, but really go to your local community development organization, as I'm sure they have resources and staff people on hand to help you through it. It is an opportunity for you to, number one, get some relief. There is no rule yet that will automatically qualify low-income Detroiters for property tax exemption. They have to go through the laborious process of applying every single year for this. And so there are some things that you would need to bring with you as you begin to go through the application process. Things like your pay stubs, your W-2 form, a valid form of government ID, proof of ownership of your home in the form of a deed. You would need some utility bills and some other things. You can go to bridgedetroit.com to figure out what you would need, your tax return and stuff like that. The deadline, people, is December 14th. The deadline is December 14th. And I encourage each and every one of you to apply and access this resource before December the 14th. Donna and I were in the building at ECN all day last year on the very last day for the HPTAP applications to go. And I think the news said, go to ECN if you need your application, if you need application help. And we were literally in ECN from 8 a.m. and we probably left well after 9 p.m. It was a line that filled our entire atrium at the time. Please, please do not wait until the last minute. Staff at these CDC organizations are happy to help you, but that last day was so stressful. Folks didn't eat, folks didn't even have time to take a bathroom break. So if as soon as you can, please, please head over to bridgedetroit.com and you can see a list of organizations that you can access, ECN being one of them. You can call 313-571-2800 to access services there, as well as a host of other organizations all throughout the city that are helping people with property tax exemption applications. So do it now. Go ahead, Donna.
In light of the shutdown, there was supposed to be a document exchange this weekend that has been canceled. And so through, is it December 7th, we're not going to be physically available to take applications. I want people to be aware of that. And I'm hopeful that the County of Wayne and the City of Detroit will accommodate the delay, because there's just no way that I can support exposing our staff to risk at this point in time. And so initially we said we weren't going to do it, and enough organizations said that the process is no longer functional right now. Now you can still email us in and call our hotlines, but we're not going to be physically present.
And I'm uncertain as to whether or not the December 7th date, where the office of the assessor will help residents apply for this too at TCF Center. That was the date that was set. I'm not sure if that is still on. We will also find out about that in light of the shutdown and provide an update to our listeners. But the date had been set before the governor announced what she announced on Sunday for December 7th at the TCF Center. So more on that to come. But right now we have not heard about an extension of the December 14th deadline. So you want to go to either bridgedetroit.com or detroitmi.gov/HPTAP to look at all of the requirements for the application, or you can call the United Community Housing Coalition as well, area code 313-405-7726. That's area code 313-405-7726. UCHC, the United Community Housing Coalition is also on hand to help with this. All right. Woo. Everybody okay? Check in. Everybody doing good? We okay?
No.
No, we're not okay. That's okay.
I'm not even a little bit okay right now, but I'm going to continue on.
Yeah. That wraps up our Fresh Off the Press segment. If you have pieces that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. Now on to our featured discussion with Khalilah and Yusef about Black men and women in this past election, the role of Black people in partisan politics, and the media framing around Black men and Donald Trump. So I heard that there was like a lively discussion on some social platform, and Donna hit me up like, yo, we got to get Yusef and Khalilah on the podcast. And so I'm going to punt to Donna to sort of tee up this discussion.
Yeah, first of all, hats off to Yusef, because he made one of the most outstanding videos ever when Ice Cube negotiated his platinum plan with Donald Trump. I watched it more than one time because you were my anger translator that day, and you were just bringing it, Yusef. So I know that you have had some criticism of some of these folks really trying to, usurp the role of actual leaders. But I think that Khalilah and I certainly have had concerns around some of the publicity around Black men supporting Trump. If you look at the exit poll projections, he got a record number of Black men supporting him this time as compared to the last time. And that said, there are fewer Black men that supported Trump than any other group other than Black women. So it might be partly exaggerated, but Khalilah, I think, felt like there was some merit in discussing this, that we couldn't just bury this under the rugs and pretend like there's not an issue that's arising in our community. So I'll let you sort of kick this discussion off, Khalilah.
Well, I think the exchange really on Facebook was Yusef, really asking a question, which was why and how did Black men kind of become the face of Trump supporters within the Black community, and that somehow that was being attributed to all Black men. And so I think that's what kind of started the exchange. And I think, from my perspective, I think my comment was that, well, no, right? We're not saying that this is all Black men, but it does bear some sort of discussion as to why, right? Someone who has been very public about their racism, about their, desire to stir up, racism and violence against Black people and people of color, why on earth would any Black man be drawn to support a candidate like that? And so I think, yes, right, there's a part of this that does have its tentacles in capitalism. But I think beyond that, some men, right, may be attracted to Donald Trump because he is a man that says whatever he wants. He does pretty much whatever he wants. He is very open and honest about his feelings towards women. And I think the New York Times ran an article about kind of his macho appeal and how, at least for Latino men, that is attractive. And I do think that for a small segment of Black men, that is also attractive, that kind of unadulterated power.
So right there is what I find interesting, because of the tagline of Black men and associating with 50 Cent, Lil Wayne, who I can't think of the other individuals, and then coming after the election, they would say 10%, 20% or whatever the numbers of Black men voted for Trump. And to your point, I think it could be some truth to it. I don't know. I haven't talked to no Negro who voted for Trump, right? But I think, but first putting it in the context of like, hey, it's the so-called Democratic right. But I think the issue is like Black men getting lumped into the interest of a P. Diddy, 50 Cent, and Lil Wayne, which is, to your point, is like, so the thing when Donna came in, our conversation shifted to hip hop, right? And we know in hip hop there's a high level of misogynistic, sexist, et cetera, et cetera. But being able to break those pieces down, and so like my point was like Stacey Dash with her crazy self. Hey, she's not a reflective of all Black women. Candace Owens, she's not a reflective of all Black women who are strong Republicans. And so where do we find the happy medium to break down the contradictions and the dynamics where we're not bunching everybody in? And I think it's tied to a larger conversation that's overdue within the Black community of Black men and Black women that intersects on so many levels.
You know what? I agree with you that if 80% of Black men at least voted for Biden and Harris, then it's unfair to tar everybody with the same whatever, you know. But I think here's the thing. When you go on social media, Black man after Black man is defending these actions. And so it's not just Ice Cube doing it. It's Ice Cube doing it and some brother I don't know on Twitter defending it, and then some brother I know defending it. And so it begins to feel like that's an issue. I think it's not an issue for everybody, but it's an issue where the solidarity that should exist between Black women and men seems to be fracturing. And we should have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I know for a fact that there are some Black men who didn't vote for Biden Harris because Harris was on the ticket and she's a Black woman. Now, I understand people have issues with her, but some of those same people don't have issues with some Black men who do equally, you know, questionable things in their political lives. So I think that as a woman, some of it feels like abandonment. Like, where are my brothers? How come you're not with us? How come we're not doing this together? How could some of you decide? How can I listen to Lil Wayne and it say this and then look at people agreeing with that? And not just on, you know, faceless Twitter. There are people I know who were defending it. And I don't know any Black woman who defended Stacey Dash.
I think in the grand scheme of things, like coming out of the election, right? So there was this narrative: Black women saved the Democratic Party, and then there was Black men who voted for Trump. And I mean, if that's the headline, right? And the seeds from that is continuation of us at odds with each other, right? And we've always been at odds with each other, not because of who we are, but because of the circumstance and situation. And so how do we pull those things apart, like the sexism? And the interesting thing is, like, I haven't publicly thought about, because I'm still formulating my mind, to your point around Kamala Harris, right? Obama didn't get the same criticism that Kamala got, which it speaks to the sexism. You know, even Biden, you know, I didn't vote for him, but Biden didn't get the same criticism when he was on the ticket with Obama. You know, the same, everything that we're talking about, the criminal justice, blah, 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 it was there then. No one talked about it. And so being able to pull those things out, like, I'm smart enough to see the sexism in there, but the reality, most men don't even recognize that they are sexist. Not to make excuses for it by any means, but being able to have a conversation about what it is, but also tying it into what our survival is, and not, like, we can disagree. Like, if you ain't broken my house, you know, if you ain't tried to sleep the person I sleep with, you know, stole money, everything else is negotiable. And I think that's where it gets so intense. And we are intense people, we know that. But how do we manage our intensity where it doesn't look like we at each other's throats?
But, you know, it is personal to me. Today, during this recording, the Republican Party tried to disenfranchise a whole city, Detroit. And if you're with them, you are my enemy. I'm just going to be, it's beyond emotional. I see you as somebody I cannot talk to. I have no interest in talking to you. I don't want to talk to John James. I don't want to in any way engage with him. Somebody reached out to me and said, would you be willing to meet with him? No. Why not? He's a good guy. I don't care if he's a good guy. He is representing something that is heinous. Now, we could disagree nuances, but I think that the thing is, we have to have certain types of standards where we can't pretend like hate is not hate. The person who lynched a Black person someplace is not somebody who maybe you want to have an open mind about. We need to have some understanding. And the systemic impact of some of these actions is as much more devastating than interpersonal racism can be. Mm-hmm. We're talking about systems of oppression that some people are working to uphold. And so for me, I don't really have any interest in it. If you, for whatever reason, didn't realize you were sexist and you just thought it was cool to vote for Trump and Pence, we're just not going to be friends. And I'm not going to respect your opinion. Now, that's where I stand. And I think that that's where a lot of Black women stand, is this feeling of betrayal when we're hearing Black men say that. And I don't know, am I speaking the truth, Khalilah? Do we feel betrayed?
Yes. And I think for me, I want to be careful because I do think the narratives can be destructive, but I also think that Black women do deserve our props, right? So we did help to carry this election, and I think Black women are stepping into their political power. But I also think, right, there's still, right, good brothers who also deserve their props as well. So I want to recognize that, and Black men, also signed on, right, to the very public letter to Biden demanding that he pick a Black woman as his vice presidential running mate. So Black men, some definitely did step up to the plate to have her back. But I think, I experienced this over the course of the summer. I was appalled and hurt and really confused because I saw a lot of Black men that I respected be silent on Breonna Taylor's killing over the summer. And when I questioned them about their silence, it was like, you're off message. You're off message. We're talking about George Floyd. And I'm like, but you can't include Breonna Taylor in your conversation. You can't include what happened to this young Black woman in your platform. And I had a very hard conversation with someone that I went to college with who has a national platform. And his platform, was about mobilizing people in elections. And it pretty much was all framed from the perspective of Black men. And I said, if you think that Black women are out here marching and voting just to protect Black men, you're sadly mistaken, right? And so he ended up being very frustrated with me. But I do think that sometimes Black women are more willing, right, to bring everybody in and shoulder, the burden of everyone. And sometimes for some men, right, it's a Black men first type of perspective. And unless they have, been introspective about the way sexism has shaped them or the way in which they still uphold patriarchy, for a lot of Black men, that is a blind spot. Here in my household, we like to say I'm a feminist who's married to a reformed chauvinist, right? And so my husband, went through that process of confronting his own sexism, as a young Black man. But not everyone goes through that process. And so I think as a community, we hurt one another, Black men and women, when we haven't done that introspection.
And see, I don't consider myself a feminist at all. I consider myself a womanist.
Well,
and I think
right.
that
not everybody knows what a womanist is.
Well, yeah, but I think it's important that we talk about it.
Yeah.
I think that a womanist is looking at supporting women's liberation, but the liberation of Black people in the context of the Black community. A womanist will say that we have got to bring equity to our community. We've got to make sure our men are strong and our boys are good and our girls are good and we are good. And there's this understanding of the intersecting well-being. And I think that we need men to step into that space. I'm not asking for men to place Black women above them. We understand there's oppression, but it does feel really crappy when Megan Thee Stallion gets shot in her foot and people just dismiss what happened to her and slut shame her and say everything. People who spend every weekend, every dollar they have, free dollar they have, making a rain on some stranger will turn around and slut shame one of the people who perhaps they may have seen one of the days they were in there. So even though she is not a stripper, but I just feel as though
Right,
the
right.
hypocrisy that we have so much anger at women for creating, for engaging in economic opportunity through sex work, but
Mhm.
we don't carry that same anger towards men for engaging in economic opportunity through drug dealing. One
Right, right.
is a permanent stain on the character of a person, and the other one is, well, he just did what he had to get by. And so I think that we have internalized misogynistic messages that are very hurtful and harmful. But I do want to return to the idea that it's not everybody. I mean,
Mhm.
there's people like Yusef, like Orlando, like many others who have spoken up in favor of women. And I think when we use broad terms like Black men to describe the problem, when in reality the problem is men, not Black men, if we're going to, be accurate, it's masculinity culture or hypermasculinity that is problematic, not Black men. And I think that a lot of times Black men get blamed for that. Heck, if 20% of Black men voted for Trump, 70% of white men did and continue
Mhm.
to do so. When we start racializing the conflict, it kind of is problematic. And I can see where that is an issue. I
Yeah.
think sometimes we generalize out of pain and out of, pushing back against narratives, and maybe the blame is too broad.
But I
And
also
can
think,
I add to this discussion really quickly and ask the question around uh, troubling trends or trends that we may see that are troubling? Because my research tells me that yes, Black women are the base of the Democratic Party, but right behind Black women, Black men are.
Yep.
And so my question is this a trend that this Trumpyism, this outward projection of the internalized white supremacy that some Black men have, is this a trend that is going to get out of control? Are we worried? Because again, the vast majority of Black men don't see it for Trump or his politics, and so where are we thinking this could go? Is this going to exacerbate as time goes on, or can we get a hold on this?
I think part of this conversation is getting a hold on it, and it's numerous other conversations. I think in terms of where it goes, it adds more, no division to where we are already divided. There's already a level of infighting, and some of it makes sense in terms of like everything that you guys have said. I agree with. Like I can't argue, challenge it. It's like what we all been talking about. What you say is how you say it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it, right? So if you step on my toe, hell yeah, I'm gonna yell. I'm gonna push, get the fuck, and vice versa. And so when you guys are speaking, you're speaking from that place as a Black woman. And I can remember just recently reading an interview from the gentleman who wrote the book My Grandmother's Hand, and he was like, Black women, my mothers, my sisters has always been my nurturer and my protector. Blah blah. When I first read it, and I struggled with it for a minute, right? And then when I thought about it, it's the fucking truth. Like I mean, at the forefront of my household was my mother, my grandmother, and my auntie, right? And but also understanding how, but I had to think deeper. The roles that Black women played was different than the roles that Black men play, and how do we reshift that where it is conducive to for the greater good for all of us. And so that's where like the narrative in terms of, and let's throw away like the Democratic and the Republican Party. I mean, that's a system that we have to participate in some way, but where's the system for ourselves? And that's where I like try to push us to in terms of developing it for us, where we're not continuing to infight, where we're saying the Black women, I mean, no one can ever take the credit from anybody, but obvious, like we know the Democratic Party still fucks over us. So that's troubling, but also understanding like we have to deal with what's in front of us. Like they say in Rome, you do what the Romans do, but is the narrative at the end of the day putting us against each other without addressing the contradiction? If I'm a sexist, misogynistic asshole, then let's put me in a room to be able to deal with that, because that makes me a threat and a danger to my community.
And that's why we got to have the nuanced conversations. I've been saying all election cycle on this show that in addition to there being a war literally on Black bodies, there is a narrative war at hand. And we have to own and take power over narrative and be able to have very nuanced discussions. Sometimes these nuanced discussions within our community need to stay within our community. Like the world don't need to see us having these kinds of discussions, right? So we talk about framing and we talk about narrative. I think that's another discussion, but I think that we could also bring in the fact that for so long in America, maleism and masculinity is framed around, number one, being able to provide, being able to go out, work with your hands, being a capitalist in so many respects, right? And so you have the Black man who has internalized white supremacist values, probably without even being acutely aware that he has. I mean, I posed a question on here before with Donna, like what is Black capitalism and what does that mean, right? And so when you internalize white supremacy in the form of capitalism, when you internalize white supremacy in the form of rugged individualism, not caring, because that ain't Black people, we're communal. We care about each other. We're about a village. When we decide to be so individual as to go against our DNA and our community so that I can eat and that only I can eat, then we have to have a discussion. We have to have that discussion too.
But I think that the reality is a lot of Black men have worshipped, honored, looked up to Donald Trump a lot of their lives. Donald Trump represents, I said something and I guess it was kind of controversial last time, didn't even mean to make you laugh, but Donald Trump has this thing about him, he's got the way he mistreats women, his disrespect for women, his vulgarity, his crassness, his love of money.
Tell him what you said, Donna.
Trump has a pimp mentality. Trump has pimp mentality. Trump is a pimp, okay? He carries himself like that. When he said, I can grab women by and make them like it, that sounds just like a pimp, okay? Yeah. It's recognizable. Pimps have always existed inside of our culture, and pimps have always been exploitative, okay? You don't have a non-exploitative pimp. I think that
Can I ask you a question? Clarify. So everything you're describing, but is that Trumpism or is that Americanism?
Americanism. I'm saying that the Trump, that the pimps have always existed in American culture. Let me be clear. Again, I think a lot of times we say,
I think it's masculine. I think it's masculinity, though.
It's masculinity. It is.
I think you can't just generalize it, right? But there's an aspect of masculinity that's on its face is also, though, about power and control and exploitation of those who are weak
and domination.
Right?
Domination.
So is that tied to white male patriarchy of the foundation of the
absolutely.
Yes.
It is.
And Black men emulates that.
Yes,
exactly, and perpetuated, and perpetuated on Black women. So I think no one is disagreeing with you, Yusef, that behavior is a part of this larger, culture, right? Patriarchy, capitalism here in America. I don't disagree with that. Right. But I'm not as concerned with all of America as I am with the Black community and how we relate to one another within the Black community.
But I think that it's also important to understand.
It's important for us to get to that point, though. We had to, like myself, to get to where I'm at, I had to go through a transformation. And not to get to not get to this transformation, I still would have been a nigga, fuck you, and fuck you. I'm glad I never got to the point where I murdered nobody. I never got to the point where I ever raped somebody, but I've done other crazy, gruesome ass shit. But we all have seeds of self-hatred in us that we're trying to uproot. Started early on, me degrading my sister because her skin was more darker than me. I didn't, you know, and we all have those different dynamics. And I'm saying, to get to your point of a healthy relationship between Black men and Black women, of how to deal with each other, is we have to plant the seeds of transformation, because we're all products of a system that has us against each other. And even some of us, like, who may not even realize, like, we go back and we talk about Abraham Lincoln, and well, most of our ancestors, they was Republicans, and the Democrats was against us. I mean, and the system is so sophisticated where now the Democrats are supposedly for us and the Republicans against us, and we get caught up in this ping pong game.
I agree with you. And, you know, when you do research on partisan politics, it's never as simplistic as the Republicans were for us and the Democrats were against us. It's always more complex than that, because America is racist in its history. And so you didn't have one side liking racism and the other side not liking racism. Racism gets expressed differently. And
both sides.
You know, there was a time when Republicans, I believe, used Black labor to try to stop union activism. You know, we were misused to be strike breakers, and they knew they bring us in, our people, our ancestors will get beaten, but they could break up a strike that way, and that way they could control white workers. So the affiliation with Black people was sometimes very utilitarian, very much using us to achieve an economic end that they wanted to. And I think that education, knowledge is power. And that brings me to another question, though, because I have been spending a lot of time really trying to understand aspects of Detroit history and Black history, because, as I think I've mentioned, I am going to be teaching a class starting in January. And so
you better mention that every chance you get.
Where?
That would be every sentence. Excuse me, Columbia University, in case you didn't know. And that would be in every Facebook status, LinkedIn post, Instagram post. Yeah, so go ahead. Go off, Donna Givens Davidson.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Oh, you know, thank you. But it's you know, when you are asked to do something like that, you have to make sure you're smart enough to carry it off, right? So I had to I'm reading everything, because you want everything to be factual and whatever. And in reading these things, I'm just aware of so much I should have known, I didn't know about our history in this community. And it makes me wonder, is there a need for us to engage in more broad-based dialectical education inside of our community? You know, we do community education about harm reduction, or we do community education about voting rights, but we don't do community education about our history and about what all of these things mean. There's so many books, there's so many things. I'm reading this book right now. I was thinking as I was reading it that Yusef probably has it. So I don't know, probably both of you do. It is Black Power, Politics of Liberation in America.
You got the cover? Let me see the cover.
Let me see if I can pull up that cover.
Oh, I forgot you got the.
I do. I'm telling you, this is my life. I do stuff, but I'm well. It's hard for me to pull this cover up, but I'll share it with you. But it's by oh my goodness. It is by Kwame Ture and Charles Hamilton.
Oh yeah, I got that one.
Oh yeah.
Listen, I was like, I know Yusef has this book. I try to sometimes compete with these, you know, book people. Yeah, there you go. Bring it.
Right here.
That right there. I knew you had read it. It's Sophie Carmichael. I knew you had read it. There's no question in my mind, because sometimes you talk like this, right?
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, it's as I read about it, and I got really excited because the first chapter of this book is called, hold on, I'm sorry to take so long, but it's such a powerful title, and if you hear it, you'll know why I was attracted to it. White Power, the Colonial Situation. And you know, I really have been trying to frame my understanding of Detroit as a colony. With
he's gonna label you a Marxist.
You know, I don't care about labels, because you know, I just care about truth. I think that we get so caught up allowing people, that's what they do, they throw a label on something. You're in a gang, you're a communist, you're a Marxist. I'm a truth seeker, And I'm trying to understand patterns and history and make sure that as we look at things, we are looking deeper than the surface and what's now. Okay, so I mean, going back to what Khalilah was saying about Black men and how men, but how do we get to be this way to me? Because if you don't know how you got here, you can't get out of it. If you don't understand how all of this relates to American culture, then we can spend so much time condemning each other for how we express American culture in our brokenness, in the broken state that we're put in, that we are not spending time trying to heal each other, because we are all healing from the trauma of not just slavery, not just post-slavery, post-traumatic slavery disorder, but post-traumatic racism disorder. And so anyway, I just want
active traumatic
yes,
racist disorder. Like,
hey, I was traumatized about 45 minutes ago, and I'm still trying to heal from that trauma. No matter what happens, the trauma of having somebody who represents Wayne County try to disenfranchise my vote to disenfranchise my vote. It's not something I'm going to forget, right?
Right. That's right.
We're traumatized as a people every time they do that.
Yeah. Orlando, you had asked a question about what are the trend, like, is this a trend that we need to pay attention to? And I think the greater trend that I see that is potentially detrimental, right, is how the far right and Christians have really politicized voting and their platform. And that has been something that really has infiltrated a lot of Black churches. And so when we think about kind of what are the trends or the trends that we need to pay attention to as a community, I think that is a growing trend. And this whole, Christian nationalism and how that has the ability to really infiltrate our Black community at greater degrees. And so I forgot the pastor that passed away maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. That was Trump's advisor. And, the Republicans are very, very focused on infiltrating churches. That is a part of their strategy. And so, Yusef, the arguments that I've gotten into more so over this past election season, honestly, weren't necessarily with Black men. A lot of them were with Black Christian women who felt that it was their calling, right, to vote for Donald Trump based on their Christian belief. And so that, to me, is a trend that we have to pay attention to.
I mean, I'm a whole Christian. I grew up Christian, grew up in the church, PK, the whole nine. I believe in the voice of God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in all of that. And I just can't fathom. I can't fathom thinking that the Lord wants me to vote for Donald Trump. I mean, are we, and that also speaks to, like, I think trauma also limits our ability sometimes to think logically and with some freaking sense. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can't, I have no words for that. My Christianity does not tell me to vote for Donald Trump. My Christianity tells me to vote for the community that I am a part of. You know what I mean? Like I said, forsaking that rugged individualism, and let's talk about how we've gotten along. The only reason why we've gotten as far as we've gotten is because we've been able to somehow stick together and create community. A vote for, I'm sorry, Christians, if I'm disappointing you, a vote for Donald Trump is a vote against your community. I mean,
well, yeah, but I think, Donna, to your point about kind of collective healing, right? For a lot of people, for a lot of Black people historically, right, spirituality, whether beyond Christianity, but spirituality, right, has been a source of healing for us individually, but also healing for us as a community. And so I think recognizing, right, that to your point, Orlando, how we as Black Christians kind of come to terms with this larger conversation about Christianity here in America is something that is also a part of our healing. Because if not, just like with sexism and patriarchy, right, you can continue to perpetuate certain things against one another and against our community if you don't go through that process of understanding and of healing.
So I do want to take a moment to let Yusuf speak on something, because we're talking about voting Democratic and voting Republican, but there are some people who made a principled decision to not vote.
Mhm.
And there are people who will say that you have defiled ancestors by choosing not to vote in this election because our ancestors died for the right to vote. I actually believe our ancestors died for freedom, and the right to vote was a pathway to freedom. I think that kind of gets mixed in. But you made a principled decision not to vote, and I want to give you a moment to explain what your thinking was.
It's simple, man. We talked about the lesser two evils. I mean, at the end of the day, it was still evil, and I think we get caught up more in why people or why we should vote versus why people don't vote, and in the ability to have a conversation whether you agree or disagree about it, and and it's a power within that. But also, even this tying everything in, it gets me to think about Du Bois, where he talks about the double consciousness. To be black and to be American is to constantly be at war with each other, and that's part like who doesn't want prosperity? Who doesn't want to be able to exercise their right? All the things that we're supposed to have, but then we know we're so far from that. The fact that I want to live in a nice, prosperous neighborhood. I don't want to have to worry about, I got to navigate through yellow tape lines and walk chalk and stuff. But we know that's not a reality for every black person in America, but that's not necessarily associated with whiteness either. But it is because of the society that we live in. And so how do we flip that? And so for me, me not voting is flipping that in terms of exercising self-determination and saying what I believe in something greater. But not getting to the point of years ago I would like how people shame people to vote, me shaming people like you vote for two jackasses. So hey, being more mature, it's always personal, but our maturity have to trump our personal at some point because it goes against us.
I guess my question with that is, and I had this conversation with two other black men, so about not voting, and for me, it's something that I don't agree with, because I still believe that there are other elections, right? So you may decide that you don't want to vote for president. So there was a young man at my house who said he wasn't going to vote for the president. Okay, fine. So are you going to vote for your local school board members? Are you going to vote for Michigan?
Yeah. I participate in local.
Right. So I think, again, a nuanced conversation about voting is more than just you are going to vote for the president or you are not, right? So maybe you don't vote for the president, but you vote down ballot. And so I think there is a nuanced conversation that has to be had. And for me, that was painful. When you talk about Orlando trends, right, to see a 24-year-old man in my home who said, I just don't want to participate in this system. Okay, so what's the alternative, right? Then how are you going to engage in this process? And then to be at the TCF Center and hear young white males say democracy is a contact sport. If you don't if you aren't engaged, if you don't vote, if you aren't on the field, don't expect this to work for you. And so that is, to me, also a part of disenfranchisement, right? Getting people to feel as though it doesn't matter. But at the same time, other people are taught that it does matter and that you will bend and you can bend the democratic process for your benefit. And so I think that is more so the nuanced conversation that we have to have. You may withhold your vote, but sometimes you actually do need to do more than just vote.
I mean, is it possible? Because I have this conversation with folks too, particularly young folks. Is it
Mhm.
possible to sort of walk and chew gum at the same time? So many young people are number one, I want to acknowledge that so many young people are passionate without the education piece. And so like, I want us to make sure, especially those of us who are educated and read on history, we pass that down. We need to be having these conversations with young people, but is it possible to walk and chew gum at the same time? People are hungry. Young people are hungry. Folks like Yusef are hungry for real revolution. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what does revolution look like in America? And, you know, from my view, I think revolution has always been bloody and violent. And my perspective is we don't need any more martyrs, particularly Black martyrs in this country. So how do we sort of infiltrate this system to bend it to our benefit while figuring out how to disrupt the system as a whole? Because it doesn't, because at its root and at its core, it is against us. It is always been against us, right? And so how do we make room and space for that conversation? Because that's a lot.
How do we make room for revolutionaries to not join in our democratic fights, right? If you consider yourself a revolutionary, do you have to go to the polls, or is your role something different? I think we have this way of trying to shame people into being like us. And unless you're a Republican, I don't really want to shame you. What are you gonna say?
But is there a third option, Donna? So I think, yes, there are some people who are revolutionaries. Then there are other people, right, who are just not engaged.
Yes. Let's engage the people who aren't engaged in some act other than being Republican. But I think that the reality is that there's a role that people who stand outside the system and shake the whatever and shake the trees and say, no, I don't accept any of this. There's a value to some of that, I think. I don't think everybody has to line up and go to the polls. Look at us. We all went to the polls. We're all trying to figure out now, did it matter? You know, so we need somebody on the outside doing other types of work. And I think that's where the respect for different
respectful roles, Donna. Yes.
You to that.
But I think, I mean, this conversation comes back full circle. We started off talking about, you know, the Trump supporters coming down, banging on the doors, yelling, which was violent behavior, and which exhibits what white America has always been about. Anytime white America is threatened by someone challenging that power, it resorts to violence. And so to Orlando's point of like people like King didn't necessarily want to be a martyr, Malcolm didn't want to be a martyr, et cetera, but understanding it came with the territory. So like I've been saying recently, I'm not fighting to die, I'm fighting to live. We're not fighting to die, we're fighting to live. Now if we die in the process, then you know, so be it. But being aware of that, it has to be a.
You just said a lot. I want to stop you for a second and say that you just said a lot, and it takes an incredible amount of bravery and resolve to get to where you are. Yes, you are fighting to live, and you said, but if we die in the process, so be it. A lot of people not there. A lot of people are like,
they not
there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I had to because we have to make room for, as Donna was saying, like the respect of roles. And there is a framework around roles in massive Black liberation. We need people who are a part of the democratic process. We need folks who can go in the White House and the legislative chambers of Congress, and negotiate on our behalf. We need agitators. And in certain instances, we need that protest. So all of these roles sort of have to sort of come together and figure out, you know, how to respect. So we spend a lot of time being mad at somebody because their role is different.
Yeah, but I think that we also don't need people to betray us. We don't need people who go
right. I was gonna say we all in our respective roles.
Right.
We fighting for the same goal.
Right. Being in the room doesn't mean anything if you're in the room selling me out. That's not the goal.
That's right. I agree with that. Okay?
And I will call you out if you're in the room selling me out. There is absolutely no reason to be in the room with Donald Trump, who is a white supremacist, narcissist, serial liar. He's not going to make any promises. Everybody's still lining up waiting for Kwame to get out of prison because Donald Trump told them that was never going to happen. I don't care how many trips and how nicely you dress and how nicely you speak to him. It's not within his character. We have to have some standards for what we allow people to do in our name. You cannot negotiate a contract with Black America unless you're talking to Black America, and Black America has appointed you to that role. Now, that said, I respect people in their roles, but I think we also have to respect what people have been doing. If there are people who have been working hard to bring about change, who am I to jump in their lane and
that's right.
But that exhibits what capitalism does, right? You know, that rugged individualism, it leads for seeds of betrayal, and even when you ain't trying to betray, but it comes back how you address that. What are the values that's governing us and how we are operating? But I think fundamentally we have to create an arena for all that to coexist. You know, where a nonviolent strategy, a revolutionary strategy, you know, where King and Malcolm was emerging to before they was able to get that, because they play us against each other. Like we don't have to have the same. You can be a Christian, I can be a Muslim, but the reality we still Black and we still getting our ass kicked because we Black. But I have to be aware of that, how me being a Black man doesn't trump the oppression of Black women. And the Black gays, right? That's the internal work that we have to do in understanding. Like there's our oppression. We overall get oppressed, but it happens differently, and we have to get in a room and having these tough conversations. Like when we talk about like Fred Hampton, we uphold him, we love him, you know, who was assassinated at the age of 21, but we don't talk about the individual who played a role in it, was an FBI informant who was able to be his damn chief of security. Like how the hell he walks off the street to be his fucking chief of security? And that's just an example of internal security, right? Like King, like Malcolm was so-called on the violent side, King was on the non-violent side. What happened? Both of them got killed though.
Right. So that's why I was gonna say, Orlando, when you talked about, you know, Yusef's comments, like you know, I don't want to die, but if I do, so be it, right? The reality is right now in our country, there's no role in the revolution or liberation of Black people that is safer than the other, right? So what we saw over the summer was bullets, right? Members of the press being shot with rubber bullets.
My nephew.
So that's where we are, right? In America, election workers, right, being harassed, you know, by white suburban people. And let's be clear, these weren't people who were coming from the UP. These were inner ring suburbs. This was Grosse Pointe, Warren, Livonia, you know, so things have definitely shifted. And so I think people have thought either out of respectability or out of safety, this is my role because I'm safer over here. I'm more accepted over here. And that tide has shifted. Nobody is safe.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I know that even the way that we express ourselves on this platform, and Donna and I are always very honest, we could find ourselves in, you know, precarious predicaments. And I've resolved that I am okay with that. I've resolved that I am okay with being in precarious predicaments. I ain't trying to die. Like that's the thing. It's still be it. You know what I mean? And I think we have to have this conversation, because who is the leader within our community to say, okay, this is it, let's go, we going, like, and who lining up front, right? Like this is,
you know what? I don't think anybody's on a suicide mission, right? Right. But I have two of my inspirations. Shirley Chisholm, Unbossed and Unbought, right? And Harriet Tubman, Go Free or Die. And, you know, death takes on so many different faces. You can die a spiritual death and still be breathing. You can die a social death. You can die an emotional death. You can, if you are Christian, believe that you will not die, but you will be, you know, transported somewhere else. So I think that the reality is nobody should pursue death for the purpose of death. But I think pursuing life and understanding that in your pursuit of life, sometimes death is what happens. It's our collective. They keep us afraid. And I'm not afraid to speak out anymore. I spent so many years swallowing my thoughts and my feelings, afraid that somehow I was going to cross some line and make some people so mad that, whatever, lose all my funding. And, I have been threatened with funding losses. I'll be honest with you. I was told by one funder, why do you keep on talking? We're paying you well. Can you just keep your thoughts to yourself? Just look nice and take the money. And I really wanted to be the kind of person who could, but I just couldn't be. I was like, actually, no, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that to say that was a form of death.
Mm-hmm.
As we move forward, everybody doesn't have to take the same position. The revolution does not necessarily have to be armed and dangerous, but I think that fighting back and demanding change is something that is part of the process that white people feel entitled to, and Black people are sometimes too afraid to take on.
Yeah. And I mean, just going back to the experience at TCF, there was a moment, right, where I had my sister in Texas reaching out to me because she saw what was going on, right? Televised on CNN, people texting me, do I need to come down there, right? Don't drive. Make sure that you don't walk out of the building by yourself. Make sure, and the Black women who were there, we checked in with one another. When are you leaving? We're not going to walk out here by ourselves. So sometimes, as you said, the threat isn't what you're doing, but what you got to be concerned about what other people will do. People have reached out to me and said, download this app. Make sure that you scrub your address, any sort of identifying information off the internet because you gave interviews, right? So things have shifted, right? And that's what has happened over the past 4 years. And I think there is more of a threat, at least that I feel, right? Just leaving my home, engaging because of what we've seen happen in Lansing, and so that's real. And I think it's something, at least for my generation, right? I'm a 70s baby, and people who have come, after me who are younger, we didn't grow up, right, feeling that same level of threat that maybe our grandparents did, or our great grandparents, or even my mother. My mother was born in the 50s. So this, for a lot of us, is very new, right? And a reality that we're having to adjust to.
So I really want to put on Gary Clark, This Land, but I'll let you all listen to it because this song is just so apropos for this moment. Maybe we'll play a little snippet of it next time. I think that I'll tell you what, if they take our votes and our election is not certified in Detroit, and if those types of things happen all over, Yusuf's army is going to grow a little. And I'm just saying, we tried the right way. Everybody stood, lined up, did everything we had to do. I was so nervous about returning my absentee vote ballot on time. But America has to understand that when they rob us of the hope of the ballot, what comes next. So I'm not saying that by a threat. I'm not saying that I will do anything, but I think it's a very dangerous time in America if they rob us of our right to vote in such a profane and open manner.
I want to thank you, Donna. You put a button on this conversation. Obviously, we are way over time. I want to thank Khalilah and Yusef for joining us on this episode of Authentically Detroit. You guys absolutely have to come back. I mean, we broke news together, we processed together, and was traumatized together, and then was still able to have somewhat of a coherent conversation, and that's not always easy in active trauma. So thank you both for joining us. If you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right, time for shout outs. Donna, do you have any shout outs?
Orlando, my head is fried right now.
So our heads are fried, but I do want to reinforce that the HP TAP deadline right now is December the 14th. Please go to detroitmi.gov/HPTAP to get information and to download the application on everything that you would need. Khalilah or Yusef, do you all want to shout out anybody before we head out?
I just want to shout out those community leaders and activists who joined the Wayne County Board of Canvassers call today at 3:00, who made their voices known on that Zoom call. Also like to shout out the two Democrats who sat on that board and who were vocal.
Yep.
Yes, who were vocal about the unprecedented decision not to certify the election, and who talked about the desire to disenfranchise our votes here in the city of Detroit. So shout out to them for being vocal and not being silent.
Yusef, do you have shout outs?
I got a crazy shout out. Man, shout out to anybody that's raising two puppies at the same time.
Ooh, and you have those stubborn breeds, those hard to train breeds. You don't have nice docile breeds.
Right. You got two. So did they tell you that having two puppies was easier than one? Is that why you got the second one?
I have a nickname, Impulsive Joe. So I was just impulsive.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to shout out Yusef because we can almost count on our episode being labeled explicit when he comes on. So thank you for giving us some diversity in our listenership and in our viewpoints. Thank you all so much for listening. We want you to catch the wave.